Hello, and welcome to Tree School Online. I'm Glenn Ahrens, OSU Extension Forester for Clackamas, Marion, and Hood River counties. It's my pleasure to be your host for today's Tree School Online webinar. Tree School Online is a production of the OSU Forestry Natural Resources Extension Program and the Partnership for Forestry Education. We want to give special recognition to the Oregon Forest Resources Institute for leading this project, and to the U.S. Forest Service and the Oregon Department of Forestry for providing a grant to give us extra funding to cover expenses. Tree School Online webinars are scheduled every Tuesday, now until July 28th. There's 2 webinars each Tuesday, one at 10 and one at 3 p.m. I have some housekeeping details for you. The Zoom toolbar should be located at the bottom of your screen. And if you don't see it, you could scroll your cursor over this area and it should pop up. On some hardware, such as iPads, the Zoom toolbar is on top of the display, and many features can be accessed through the toolbar. Audio is muted for participants unless unmuted by the host, and video is not available for participants. Written questions should be posted in the Q&A box, and it will be monitored throughout the webinar. I'm going to be looking at those. So we're asking that you put all of your questions for the presenters in the Q&A box. We're not able to take spoken questions. For the chat, we use that for technical issues or things you want to point out to us. Also, we will be putting information in the chat for you from time to time, but we want all of your questions to be in the Q&A. We also have resources that we'll be posting for all of our Tree School Online classes in the class guide. You can reach that from the knowyourforest.org and click on a webinar description for any webinar and look for resources that the instructors have. And in this case today, this one is also available for continuing education. If you happen to be a Oregon professional logger, through the Associated Oregon Loggers, there's a form to get credits for continuing education with the resources at Tree School Online. We are recording these webinars, and those will be archived, and so you'll be able to find them again at the Know Your Forest site, the Tree School Online page. Another thing we're doing here is we're doing polls to find out what you are thinking, and also where you're from, and if you're a woodland owner or a forester, and how many acres you have. The poll should pop up on your screen in a box at the bottom, and after you answer the questions, the poll will be closed. If you don't see the poll, you can look at the Zoom toolbar. It should be a lighted button there, and if that appears, you can pop up the poll when you press that button. Also, I have a disclaimer that the views and opinions expressed by our speakers are theirs and theirs alone, and not those of OSU, Oregon Forest Resources Institute, or the Partnership for Forestry Education. And with that, I'd like to introduce Rob Clark. So if you could turn your camera on, Rob.
Yep, I'm here. Very
good. All right, and Rob has supported Tree School for, I think, over 20 years. I've only been in charge of Tree School for about the last 8, and I've seen Rob at Tree School as long as I can remember. And he's going to talk to us about small engine care and maintenance. Sorry you can't support us in person at the big event at the Clackamas Community College, Rob, but let's see what you can do with this online venue for talking about small engine repair and maintenance. So go ahead.
All right, thanks, Glenn. I appreciate this opportunity to Glenn and OSU for being able to take this time and share with everybody. Teaching is a passion of mine. I really believe that education is great, and I just want to thank everybody for that. So let's get going here. So small engine care and maintenance is presented by me. I am the presenter, Rob Clark. So who is this for? Just so you know you're here, you belong here. This is for anyone who owns, operates, or depends on power equipment. Those who want to eliminate the stress of poorly running equipment. Those that want to depend on their equipment running when they are ready to use it. And those that have a job to do, don't have time to stop, fix the engine, and return to the job. The goal here is to educate you so you to keep your equipment running at optimal efficiency and experience less breakdowns and frustrations that come along with breakdowns. Today you'll learn what needs to be done on your equipment, what you're looking for, when it needs to be done, the number one reason that causes engines not to start, and how to eliminate that forever. How to eliminate the frustrations of equipment that won't start or runs poorly. And if you stay with me all the way to the end, I have some special offers that will save you time, money, and frustrations. All right. And so a little bit about Clark's. We've been in business since 1976. Our mission at Clark's is to create a community where we know our customers. We don't want to just have people walking through the door and have no idea who you are. And ultimately, you then become family. We're family owned and operated, have been since the beginning. Our employees become family, and ultimately our customers become family. If you talk to any of our customers that's been dealing with us for any length of time, they treat us like family, we treat them like family, and it just makes the world a happier place. Our motto is saving the world one mower at a time. In this case, it would be one chainsaw at a time. Simply put, that if your chainsaw or lawnmower runs at a more efficient rate, you have less experiencing of breakdowns and frustration, then you are in a happier place. You don't go out and have road rage, and you don't tear up the world, and makes the world a happier place. We've been in business for 44 years now. A little bit about me. Robert Clark. I am the owner of Clark's Lawn and Garden Equipment. I've got 40 plus years of mechanical and business experience. My dad started this in 1976. I hung around him well before that and during those first years of the business. So I've actually got well more than that experience, but actual on the books experience is over 40 years. I am a Briggs & Stratton Master Certified Technician. I'm a Honda Engines Master Certified Technician. I'm a Kohler Engines Master Certified Technician. I'm a Steel Factory Gold Certified Technician. What that all means is I've got years and years of experience. I do this day in and day out. It's not just something I teach, I actually do it. And I've done it so much and so long that I really don't even think about what I do anymore. It just flows right out of me. And so when I do presentations like this, oftentimes I go too fast because it seems normal to me. If I go too fast, if I don't cover a subject well, or if I leave something unquestioned, make sure you put something in the Q&A, and that way we can answer questions for you later.
Hey, Rob, I'm going to slow you down for a second. I wanted to do that poll so you can see who's out there in the audience. Also,
yeah, absolutely.
I heard my microphone was making noise, so how does this sound? A little better?
Sounds great to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks for that introduction, and now let's find out who's out there. So I'm going to put up the poll, and we'll find out where you're from. If you just answer those questions, it'll only take about a minute. I'll give us a chance to slow Rob down a little. And then also about yourself, if you're a woodland owner or a natural resource professional or other. And if you own land, how many acres? And so we'll just see where folks are coming in. And as we often see, for Clackamas Tree School, we tend to get mostly from the Willamette Valley area, some from other parts of Oregon and Washington State across the river, and a few folks from outside. All right, I think we're about there, so I'm going to close the poll, your last chance. Okay. And I will share the results so we can all see what we found out. So about 3/4 of us from the Willamette Valley area, and some from coastal Oregon, about 12% from Washington State, a few from outside the Northwest in the US, and no one from outside the country. 81% woodland owners and some private and public natural resource professionals, and about 10% that are just here to learn about engines, regardless of whether they own woodlands. As far as acreage, about 8% don't own forest land, but most folks are in that 10 to 40 acres, about a third, and then 10 acres or less, about 17%. And then about the other part is over 40 acres up to 100, and even some with more than 1,000. So that's who we are, and I'll turn it over back to you, Rob, and we can keep going. And I will look at the Q&A, so please put your questions in, and then we'll have a chance to answer those about midpoint and at the end. So go ahead, Rob.
All right, thanks, Glenn. So yes, please do put your questions in the Q&A for me. I really like those questions. All right, so let's get into this. Top 3 things for maintaining equipment. And this is very basic stuff, but it's all very important stuff. So this is on the assumption that your equipment is running properly at the time and you're just maintaining it, keeping it running, keeping it from having problems. If you do these things, you'll eliminate 90% of your problems. And the top 3 things are really simple. It's oil, your filters, whether that's your air filter or fuel filter, and your spark plug. It's really basic. It's nothing technical. It's not too hard, and it's all easily done by the homeowner. Although our shop, and there's many other shops out there that provide the service for you should you decide you don't want to do it. But the ultimate point is, once you have your equipment running, don't forget about your cutting device, your chain on a chainsaw, blade on a lawnmower. This is why you need it to run in the first place. Keep it sharp, because if you don't have a sharp chain or a sharp blade, then you're defeating the purpose of why you're having it run in the first place. And it doesn't really matter how well it runs if it's not going to cut very well. So don't forget about your chain. Let's start with oil. You should check it every time you start. I can't tell you how many customers day in and day out that tell me over and over and over they didn't even know their lawnmower took oil. Obviously, with the chainsaw, you don't have oil reservoir typically beside your bar and chain oil. You just want to make sure that you mix it properly with the 2-cycle mix. Majority of chainsaws nowadays are a 50-to-1 ratio, which is 2.6 ounces of oil to a gallon of gas. And if you use proper gas and oil, then you don't have to worry about checking your oil, obviously. For lawnmowers or other power equipment engines, you want to check it every time. You want to change it every 50 to 100 hours, depends on how severe your use is or the conditions you're using it in. If you don't reach those hours minimum, do it once a year. Use quality oil. Again, I can't tell you how many engines I've seen that are destroyed because they went and bought the cheapest oil they could find. Most power equipment engines, especially most chainsaws, are extreme high performance nowadays. And you want to use them as if they are a race car and use the best oil that you could buy. Majority of them take either a 30 weight or a 10W30. You could use either one. If it's in colder conditions, use the 10W30. If you're unsure of the type of oil that your particular machine uses, simply give me a call at work, or you call any other power equipment dealer, and they could tell you what your particular machine should use. But just make sure to use a good quality oil in that. Your air filter, your air and fuel. Air filter, most are a washable filter. Some of the newer lawnmowers use a paper filter. Obviously, those are not washable, but your chainsaws are generally a washable filter. They are usually a felt or a type of a fuzzy material that is very washable, and you simply wash it out in soap and water and let it dry overnight. Do not wash them out in gasoline. It's a common thing to do, and it puts too much oil in it, and it actually chokes down the filter. It plugs it up just as if you didn't clean it at all. So don't wash it out in the gasoline. If you are a foam filter, you could certainly wash it out in gasoline, although it's still recommended to wash it out in soap and water, and then make sure you re-oil your foam filter before you reinstall it. You do not re-oil felt or fabric ones. You only re-oil the foam ones. If it's a felt design filter, you simply hold it up to the light after you cleaned it, and if you can see light through it, that means the felt is wearing off and you need to replace it. Besides that, they last a long, long time. If you're cleaning on a regular intervals, you can go 10, 20 years on an air filter and you don't need to replace them. Make sure you use factory replacements only. Never, ever use cheap aftermarket filters. You may save a few bucks on it now, but you'll replace an expensive chainsaw or lawnmower later on, because 90% of the time they don't seal right, they don't filter right, and you get dirt and debris in there just as if you didn't have a filter in there at all. So it makes no sense to buy an expensive chainsaw and then go buy the cheapest air filter you could find. Use quality filters. Your fuel filter, most lawnmowers have them built into them. They're not replaceable, they're not serviceable. Most chainsaws have them, and they are in the gas tank, generally located in the gas tank. And for the most part, you could simply unscrew your gas cap, take a coat hanger or something, make a hook, and pull it up through your gas cap. And you do not clean them, you simply replace them. You can look at it if you want, but there's no point. Just replace them yearly. If you're having any running issues at all, it's one of the first things you want to change, because fuel gives a majority of the problems. So you simply pull it out and replace it. Spark plugs rounds out the top three. Replace these yearly. Don't clean them. A lot of people try to clean them. All it does is give you the possibility of injecting dirt or debris or sand or whatever you use to clean it with back into the system, which can cause more damage than good. Spark plugs are inexpensive. Simply replace them. Set the gap at 25 thousandths. That's 99% of all machines will be at that. There are a few odd ones, but for the most part, 25 thousandths will set you up. If you come to me and buy a spark plug, we always preset the gap for you, so you don't have to. Fuel. This is the #1 repair that we do in the shop. It causes the most problems more than anything else. So if you're doing your main three, your spark plug, your air filter, and your oil, really the only thing you need to worry about is fuel at that time. 80 to 90% of all repairs are fuel related nowadays. Make sure you use 87 octane or higher. Everybody always thinks if they use too high of an octane, it will burn it up. It is actually just the opposite. The higher the octane, the cooler it runs. It will not burn up your chainsaw. Use fuel with 10% of ethanol or less. That's what Oregon has as a standard. I believe Washington's the same. Technically, they're not supposed to sell you anything with 10% or more, but there are always reports of where somehow, somewhere, more than 10% has slipped in there. You want to make sure you get less than 10% ethanol. The problem with ethanol is a harsh cleaning detergent and will do serious damage to your machine even at 10% ethanol. Now, all machines are designed to run on 10% ethanol, but it doesn't mean you're not going to do any damage to them. It will just run like that. Anytime you're using ethanol in your gas tank, you want to get it out as soon as you can. You don't want to keep it in there for any more than 30 days at a time. Recommended use is if you're using an ethanol fuel, which you're going to get at most gas stations, you simply use the machine, use your chainsaw, dump it out when you're through, and let it run dry. Get the ethanol out of there as much as possible. Just sitting in there will deteriorate all your parts and cause damage. Non-ethanol fuel is preferred. You can get this. There are gas stations everywhere that has this. If you simply go to www.pure-gas.org, they list all the current gas stations that have and sell you non-ethanol fuel. Find your closest location and get it there. Again, you want to keep no more than 60-day supply on it, though. You do not have to dump it out of your machine right away, although it's not a bad idea to. But keep no more than 60-day supply. The gasoline that we have nowadays is of extreme poor quality, and you want to make sure you Don't leave it in there to deteriorate. What we used to keep around for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you don't want to keep around for 30 or 60 days anymore. So if you're using a non-ethanol fuel, go ahead and use it. Don't need to worry too much about dumping it out, but use no more than 60 days supply. Be careful about getting large quantities. I know it's way more convenient to go get 5 to 10 gallons of gas. That way you don't have to run to the gas station. But as you store it, it's deteriorating constantly. You don't want that to happen. You don't want it to tear up your machine. So I recommend don't do that. Ethanol attracts moisture. So if you have a gas can or a chainsaw or a lawnmower sitting around with ethanol fuel in it, it actually attracts moisture and won't bring moisture into it. Lawnmowers, it doesn't hurt them so much as it just tends to make them run horrible. But chainsaws, water in your fuel will actually score up your piston and cylinder because it wipes away all the moisture, or the moisture will wipe away all your oil on your piston and cylinder, and it's like running without any oil in it at all. So moisture in your saw is not good. Ethanol attracts moisture, thus ethanol is bad. The best that you could get is pre-canned fuels. Most lawnmower chainsaw dealers sell this. After you open the can, it's got a two-year shelf life. It is extremely good, high quality, stable gas. You do not ever need to pour it out of your chainsaw. You could leave it in there for 2 years if you wanted, and it would still be good. When you buy it, you can get it pre-mixed, so you don't even have to mix it with oil. You simply open the can and pour it in. It's very, very convenient. The problem with it is it's very expensive also. You pay quite a bit of money for that. Most of the major brands who sell it are running about $30 per gallon. The convenience is you simply come into the shop and you buy it and then you go home and use it. The bad part is it's too expensive. So here's a technician's tip for you. Simply go to an airport. Most small airports, the one local around here is Aurora Airport. And you go up and you tell them that you want to buy avgas or aviation fuel. Don't get jet fuel, that's a diesel, but get avgas. It's the same thing that you're buying in the can. You could buy big quantities of that if you want. You could buy 5, 10, 15, 20 gallons. You could buy as small as 1 gallon if you want. That's got the same long life. It does not tear up your machine. You could leave it in there all the time. The nice thing about that is since it has no ethanol in it, it does not attract moisture. And so by leaving it in there, you're not bringing in any extra moisture. It's actually recommended to leave it in. That way you keep all your rubber parts of your chainsaw lubricated because it's got moisture against it with the gasoline. So it's a good idea at that point to leave your gasoline in the saw, in your lawnmower, keep it full, and then you always are ready to go. So that's the biggest tip there is use avgas. Last I looked, it was about $6.50 per gallon, so it's still more expensive than pump gas, but it's a whole lot less expensive than the pre-canned gas, and it's pretty readily available. Most small airports sell it, and it keeps you from having expensive repairs in the future. All right, so I'm going a little fast here. I apologize about that. For some of you watching this, you understood most of what I covered here, and you know what to do, which is great. The key thing is to do it. For this online tree school, I'm also offering a 10% off of all tune-up parts. So if you come into my shop, Clark's Lawn and Garden Equipment in Oregon City, because you're watching this show, I will sell you discounted tune-up parts to help keep you maintaining your equipment. If you choose not to do it yourself, or you just don't have time to do it yourself, I'll also offer 10% off all repairs that are brought in the shop. So if you just want to tune up your lawnmower or your chainsaw, I'll give you 10% off for that also. So with that, quick break time. I apologize about that. The second half will go a little bit longer. But time for Q&As. If Glenn, if there's anybody that's got some questions for me.
All right. There are some questions, and I hope my microphone is working better now. So
you sound great.
synthetic oil versus regular. Specifically, how long can we go between changes using synthetic versus regular oil?
Synthetic oil will, in essence, double your maintenance time. However, basic shop rule, talk to most mechanics, they still recommend you change it on the same routine intervals. So again, 50 to 100 hours or once a year. If you're using it under harsh conditions, the synthetic oils will hold up better, and it's certainly recommended, although still change them on a routine basis. Don't think you're going to go 10 years without changing your oil. It's not a good idea.
Not that long. Here's a question I can just answer. Will there be an outline provided after the webinar? And someone asked about the slides being available. And so we'll go ahead and post a PDF of the slideshow, Rob, if that's okay. Then we'll post that on the Know Your Forest Tree School online site, along with the recording of this presentation. All right, here's a technical question. Will the Steel MS392T, with that it sporadically acts as if it's running out of fuel, will die intermittently, at times not accelerate, and the rest of the time works as it should. Seems to be worse when the saw is on the side. So trying to troubleshoot online a steel saw that acts like it's running out of fuel.
There's various things that could cause engine to do that. Typically, you're describing a fuel-related problem. The vast majority of these are a carburetor-related problem. It could be something else. You could have something floating in a fuel line, the fuel line deteriorating and causing it to suck shut or something like that. But generally, we're talking carburetor. Generally, you're talking check valves inside the carburetor. All carburetors nowadays from the manufacturers all have little tiny check valves that are cast into the carburetor and you can't even get to them. They have to put these on there to meet current emission standards because chainsaws for many years ran way too rich and blew out tons of gasoline that they weren't burning, and so they have to do this to meet emission standards. But the downside of that is these little check valves go bad and they give you all sorts of problems. One that does it intermittently, like you're talking about, is really hard to diagnose because when it's working right, you can't tell if it's bad. Chances are you have a carburetor with a bad check valve, and the only cure for that is replacing the carburetor. Just using it to make these check valves go bad, but using ethanol fuel in it advances that. It speeds up that process. So again, use a non-ethanol fuel if at all possible.
Okay, now here's a question. Regular unleaded gasoline versus non-ethanol gasoline. I guess that's kind of the same question about ethanol.
So your regular gasoline is an 87 octane, which none of the manufacturers recommend you use. They all are 89 octane or higher. Most gas stations will sell both a regular or 87 octane and a Supreme, which is a 92 octane. Get the 92 octane. It's a much better gas. If you're going to go buy it at the pump gas station, get the Supreme, get the 92 octane, even if it's got the ethanol in it. Just make sure you dump it out when you're through using it. If you get the non-ethanol, then definitely get the 92. But again, you don't want to keep it on hand any more than 60 days supply. Use it up. Don't store it.
Okay. You mentioned not using inexpensive aftermarket air filters. Do you feel the same about the MaxFlow filters for power saws that Bailey sells?
Yeah, I do. MaxFlow is a good, decent air filter, except they're not made by the major manufacturers. They're not made by Husqvarna or Stihl or Echo or any of the major manufacturers. And so they have different criteria on what they're trying to do. They're probably an okay filter. The problem is if you use that filter and you suck in some dirt, the manufacturer of the air filter is not going to stand behind you. If you're using a let's say you have a Husqvarna chainsaw and you're using a Husqvarna filter and you're sucking in some dirt, chances are they're going to stand behind it. They're going to call it a manufacturer's defect and they're going to take care of you. So my go-to is always use a manufacturer's filter no matter what you do. You'll gain a little bit of performance out of the aftermarket filters, but not enough to make a difference.
All right, what about using gas stabilizers?
Gas stabilizers are a good idea. If you're using an ethanol fuel, you're going to dump it out right away, so it makes no difference whether you use a stabilizer in it anyway. You could stabilize the ethanol fuel. You still have ethanol in there deteriorating and everything, so you want to get it out. If you get a non-ethanol fuel, the stabilizer does help. You want to be careful. There's a lot of stabilizers out there that are ethanol based. And so by adding the stabilizer in there, you're adding ethanol into your good non-ethanol fuel. So you want to make sure it's a non-ethanol stabilizer, but you still have a poor quality gas. Your non-ethanol fuels are simply the same pump gas that you get for the street. They just don't have the ethanol in it. They still don't last very long. The stabilizers will help with that factor, but it doesn't replace the fact that you're a poor fuel. So not a bad idea. In my mind, I wouldn't waste my time because I wouldn't keep the gas around long enough to make it a problem.
A related question, someone was surprised about hearing about the pre-canned fuels and wondering just how the shelf stability, how long they really last and, why they last so long. What are they
Well, the reasons why they last so long is because they don't have all the additives that these manufacturers have to put for street gas that the government requires us to put into. They're just a pure fuel. The same basic thing you're going to get with avgas, with aviation fuel. And if you think about it, if you got an airplane flying overhead that is running really, really poor quality gas and his carburetor plugs up and he falls out of the sky, the people aren't going to be too happy about that. So they allow them to run a more pure fuel, what we used to get, 40, 50 years ago before they started adding everything in for the emissions that we have nowadays. The canned gas, the manufacturers all state a 2-year shelf life once it's open. So you could buy that can, stick it on your shelf, not use it for 2 years, and then open the cap. Once that cap's been opened, now you have a 2-year shelf life. This is an extremely conservative number. I personally have had some sitting around for 5 years just testing it, and it's still good gas. Does not deteriorate. They have to put a number on it, so they put 2 years on it, but for the most part, you could buy it and not have to worry about it. Just keep it on hand, and it's always good.
So the canned gas just lasts long because it's pure, and they don't have stabilizers in it or anything extra.
No, they don't have any stabilizers. They still have all the junk additives that make the gas go bad.
And then a similar question about avgas. Is it similar to a clear non-ethanol gas?
It's similar to a clear non-ethanol gas, but without all the additives, because your basic non-ethanol gas that you get at the gas station still has a bunch of additives. It just doesn't have the ethanol is all.
All righty. Here's another one. About wood splitters, do you have any recommendations about which ones work the best with least repairs, and don't say an axe and a maul?
Well, axe and maul does work good. I'm not going to go into brand because there's many different brands out there. My recommendation is buy something from somebody who is going to stand behind it and be there to repair it for you later, because I don't care what brand of any equipment you get, at some point in its life, it's going to break down. Namely, don't go buy a Harbor Freight Chinese unit unless that's what you want to do, is use it for a few times and then throw it away. Because when it breaks down, when the engine breaks down and you can't get any parts for it, you end up having to put another motor on it, or if your ram breaks, you can't get any parts for it and you got to replace the whole machine. So my recommendation is go buy a quality unit from a dealer who is going to stand behind it, and the manufacturer is going to be there for several years down the road to supply parts and service for you later.
Okay, well, we seem to have pretty good time here, so I'll just keep going with these questions if you don't mind.
No, go ahead. I love them.
Do you need to add oil to the avgas?
For your chainsaw, you do. For your lawnmower, you just pour it in straight. Your avgas is going to be just like if you were to buy it at the gas station. You got just a straight gasoline, and chainsaws are a 2-cycle, which takes a mixture, so you'll need to add oil to that. Yes.
Another question about fuel additives. I'm not sure if it's the same as stabilizers. Maybe the question is, are there any additives that would extend gas life, reduce moisture, etc., or you just need to buy good gas? Are there additives?
There's a lot of additives out there that claim that they'll take the ethanol out. They claim that they'll take the water and the moisture out. They don't take it out. They cannot remove the ethanol. The ethanol is there. It does not come out. All it does is bind it together. One of the problems you have with ethanol fuel, if you let it set around, it's what they call phase separation, where the ethanol will separate out of the gas. And what happens is that ethanol will drop down to the bottom. And so when you're pouring it out of the top of the can, you're getting more of a straight gas. The ethanol then goes into your gas tank later on, and then you're running on almost a pure ethanol, which will make it run really good and really quick and really hot, but it's so much so that it will burn up your chainsaw or your lawnmower. So the additives that they use don't take it out. They simply bind it together to help it from phase separating out. Again, you're still dealing with ethanol in the gas. You're never going to get it out of there. Don't let it sit around for any length of time. Don't buy it.
All right. Any suggestions for what to do with the surplus mixed gas that's been stored for more than 60 days?
Well, there's various things you could do. The environmental way to do it would be to take it down to your recycling center, Metro, and they'll take it for recycling, just like they do old paints and old solvents. However, it's for the most part decent gas if mixed with a bunch of other gas. So a lot of people take it and put it into your car. It's the same thing that you're getting. You're just adding a tiny bit of 2-cycle oil if you have it mixed with 2-cycle, which in a 15, 16-gallon tank blends it out to be almost nothing, so it won't hurt. You won't even notice it. If it's old enough to where it won't run anymore, if it's over 90 days or a year old or something like that, you don't want to use that. It's become lacquer and it won't run in anything, so you'll want to take that down to a recycling center and have them take care of it.
Right. And then related to the avgas, does it last as long as the can gas, the 2 years?
Yes. Yes, the avgas is the same basic thing you're buying in the can gas. It just doesn't have a name brand on it, and you're buying it. You have to go to the airport to get it. It lasts just as long. I've had 5 gallons sitting around for well over 5 years, and it's just as good as the day one. It does not deteriorate. It's good gas. You're good with that.
All right. Here's one about the 2-cycle oil. Steel sells 2 types. One in an orange container, one in a gray container. What's the difference? Why would you use one over the other?
Your orange container is your standard oil that they've used for many, many years. Your gray container is your newer synthetic oil that they're using nowadays. They're both good oils, and I would not throw away any orange bottle if I had it. Still is moving more and more towards selling only the synthetic oils. You'll see less and less of the orange bottles on the shelves. The synthetic oil, the chainsaws haven't changed so much as the oils that changed. And they've actually tested the synthetics at 100-to-1 ratio, and it runs just fine at that. It's a good enough oil to run that lean. The problem is at 100-to-1 ratio, Steel decided that there's too little room for error, and they don't want to chance that, so they still recommend you run it at 50-to-1. So they're both good oils. If you have a choice, buy the gray synthetic oil.
Okay. If you do have gas that has stabilizer, is there any problem using it in a chainsaw?
No, the stabilizer isn't any worse than using ethanol in it itself if it's got ethanol in it. The stabilizer itself won't hurt anything if it's mixed at the proper ratio. You don't want to run pure stabilizer, obviously. But stabilized gas won't hurt anything if it's within the date range, if it's still a good quality of gas.
Okay. Would it do any good to switch to avgas now after having used non-ethanol for the past 10 years?
I would absolutely. I would do it tomorrow, or use up what gas you have now. But next time you go get gas, if it's convenient at least, yeah, go buy a gallon or 5 gallons of avgas and just start using that. It's not going to make any difference to the machine at all. Besides, it'll probably run a little bit better.
Right. Can you add your ethanol-free gas to the ethanol gas in your tank in your car or truck when it's getting close to expiring? Why not burn it in your
So legality-wise, I'm going to have to stand here and say no, because you're putting non-ethanol gas. And if you go to a gas station that sells non-ethanol gas, they cannot put it into your car because legality-wise, you have to have ethanol gas for DEQ reasons. So with that said, I would say no. However, I can't tell you how many people do that. Perhaps if you don't want to put it in your car, if you have an ATV or a motorcycle or something like that, you can pour it in that, or give it to your neighbor if you don't like them.
All right. Well, I think we can go back to your presentation now. There's a few more questions, but we'll get those at the end and any more that come up.
All right. Very good. So we'll continue on then. The second half of this presentation is on chainsaw troubleshooting. Since this is tree school, I thought that this would be a good thing to cover on figuring majority of people have chainsaws, or at least know someone that does and are around them a lot. So the first half of this covered how to keep your engine from giving you problems. The second half is going to be more of what happens when you have a problem. What do you need to do to fix it? And so here we go. So there's 3 things that make an engine run: spark, fuel, and compression. Once you have those 3 things, you're left with timing. All 3 of those must be present at the right time. And on a chainsaw, you have to have a sealed crankcase. Lawnmowers, you don't have to have a sealed crankcase. It'll just leak oil. On a chainsaw, it causes you to run lean if you don't have a sealed crankcase, which then makes your air-fuel ratio leaner and then will make you burn up your chainsaw. 2 cycles required a sealed crankcase under both vacuum and pressure. So spark, let's cover that first. Spark is the easiest thing to check. You simply confirm the presence of spark using an approved tester. All engines are now electronic ignition, and they have been since 1983 is when the manufacturers stopped using point ignition. So nowadays you either have spark or you don't. There are some other factors that occasionally play into fact because they all have diodes and resistors and other electronics inside the coils that will have something to do with their timing, but those go out so rarely that for the most part you don't have to worry about them. And the only way to check them is to replace your coil with a known good coil to see if it's any good. So simply put, you simply check with a spark tester. You either have spark or you don't. If you don't, a few things to check is simply to check and make sure your ignition coil is properly grounded, and to make sure that your shutoff switch is not causing the problem, grounding you out, because that's how you shut your engine off, is by grounding out your ignition. So you want to eliminate your shutoff switch, make sure your coil is properly grounded, and then set your coil to flywheel gap at 10 thousandths. You'll do that with your magnets. You could use a business card or a 10 thousandths feeler gauge, put it between your coil and your flywheel, turn your flywheel to your magnets. Your magnets will pull the coil up tight against your flywheel and you tighten it down. It's really simple. So for the most part, spark, you either have it or you don't. Compression. Typically, we're looking for 90 PSI or better. You could do this with a compression gauge. However, it's a little tricky to do because the faster you pull or the harder you pull, you get different readings from the different mechanics or different people doing it. So the technician trick here is to hold the saw by the starter handle. So you simply grab the starter handle, don't grab anything else, just the starter handle, and raise it up to waist or shoulder high and just hold it there. The saw should not drop down through compression. The saw should hold itself up under its own compression. You may drop 1 or 2 compression strokes at the most, but if it drops completely and goes all the way to the ground, that means you're no good. That means your compression is too low. The faster it drops, the lower your compression, the worse your chainsaw is. So simply hold it up by the starter handle, and if it holds up, it means you're good. So once you test your spark, once you test your compression, then you go on to the fuel system. If either one of those other two are not working good, you cannot diagnose a fuel system properly. If after you confirm that the spark compression is okay, then you can now confirm if you have any other problems. You need to confirm a pressure and vacuum leak. These take special tools to do for the most part. You can make them yourself, but you have to seal off your intake and your exhaust and put it under pressure and read that pressure. It should hold pressure and vacuum. Once you have that done, you can now evaluate the rest of the fuel system, which is your fuel filter, your fuel line, your carburetor, and your impulse line. All of these go into the fuel system as a whole and need to be evaluated all together. You cannot just look at your carburetor, because you could easily have a plugged up fuel filter or a deteriorated fuel line. The ethanols nowadays eat up rubber parts, and your fuel line is made out of rubber. So you want to make sure you don't have cracked line or one that's coming apart on the inside. Your impulse line, this is something that most people don't even know about. Your impulse line runs between your crankcase and your carburetor, and it actuates the fuel pump side of your carburetor. If your impulse line is bad, it's like taking your fuel pump off of your car and you don't run. You can't get any fuel to the system, so you want to check that also. Generally, during your pressure or vacuum test is where you're going to find out if your impulse line is okay. The modern two-cycle carburetors have built-in check valves. I referred to that earlier. And to check these, you need special tools and proper testing procedures. You could make these yourself. For the most part, you cannot buy these tools. They're special made by the manufacturers of the equipment. We test them all the time. If you have a carburetor that you want to test and you're unsure how to do it, simply bring it in. We'll put our tests on it. It takes just a few minutes to test the carburetor, tell you if it's bad or if it's good. It's a 3-step procedure, and I could tell you if your check valves are good or bad. But if they're bad, it doesn't really matter, because you can't get to those check valves. They are cast into the carburetor. You cannot replace them. You have to replace the whole carburetor. On the upside, the prices of most carburetors nowadays have come way down in price and are no longer worth the time to rebuild. You simply replace the carburetor. There are a few carburetors, with some exceptions, that are extremely expensive. Those obviously you'll want to try to rebuild as much as possible. But for the most part, they've come way down in price. You can buy a new carburetor for $20 to $40 oftentimes, and just slap it on, make sure your fuel line filter is good, and you're off going again. There are some of the newer carburetors now. Steel has some, Husqvarna has some, where they are computer controlled. You cannot even adjust these carburetors except via the computer. These are extremely expensive ones, and these you want to have rebuilt by a shop that knows what they're doing. That's basically what it takes to troubleshoot it. It doesn't take a whole lot. Spark, fuel, and compression, pretty basic. Once you have those, make sure you pressure test, make sure your seals and your gaskets are all properly functioning, and then check out your fuel system. Like I stated at the very beginning of this, fuel is the biggest problem that causes the most problems, that we see the most repairs on in the shop. If you maintain proper fuel, if you go get some good gas and you're using that consistently, not that you'll never have a problem, but you'll drastically reduce your problem. I had one customer in this last year that had 4 machines. 2 of them he brought in, and we placed carburetors on them because they were bad. He finally brought in last week his chainsaw, his 3rd machine, and it also has the same problem. And he finally said, okay, you finally convinced me. I'm using regular gas, or using av gas, or the canned gas. He finally opened his eyes. He finally woke up to the fact that the gasoline was causing his whole problem, and he literally spent about $500 in repairs that some expensive gas would have easily taken care of. He would not have had any downtime, and he would have been way money ahead, even though he's buying expensive gas. Chain sharpening, I could spend a whole class just teaching chain sharpening. There's a lot to chain sharpening. My dad, Dwayne Clark, has always stated it is always better to touch up a sharp chain than it is to sharpen a dull chain. Don't wait until your saw absolutely won't cut before you're ready to sharpen your chain. Sharpen it, touch it up. It takes less time to touch up a sharp chain than it does to sharpen a dull chain. So it only takes you a few seconds to touch up a chain. And it saves you a lot of work, saves your saw a lot of work, because with a dull chain, you're only making your work harder. Better idea is also to keep an extra chain with you on hand. It is easier to change out a chain instead of replacing it, or instead of sharpening it. Simply swap it out, replace it, sharpen your other chain at a convenient time for you. Again, tree school, I'm offering. Anybody who comes in and mentions tree school, we generally charge $12 for chain sharpening. I'm offering $5 chain sharpening to anybody for this free school. If you want to learn how to sharpen your chain yourself, just let me know. I'd be happy to teach you. I can teach you right at my shop. I'm also offering a video for anybody who has any questions on this entire course that I just taught, whether that's how to sharpen your chain, how to change your spark plug, how to find your air filter, how to replace your fuel filter. Just let me know what you have, what you've got, what you want to know, and I'll simply shoot a video for you and I'll send it to you free of charge. I want to support you guys. I want you guys to be able to take care of your equipment, and I'm here to help you out. So with that, that's really all I've got. Thanks for attending. Thanks for watching, and thanks for the questions. And I look forward to more questions here, Glenn.
All right, very good. Thank you, Rob. Well, we do have a few more questions. I'm not sure the context of this one. It says, what about diesel? So are there any small engines that run on diesel?
There are some small engines. There have been a few chainsaws, but extremely few because it makes them really heavy. You'll usually find diesel in small to mid-sized tractors, and I think he's referring to, or she's referring to, diesel fuel stable. Diesels don't fall into the same category. They don't have the deterioration that gasoline does. They are a lot more stable. You don't need to add additive to it, except for a additive to keep it from freezing up when it gets cold, because diesel will gel up when it gets cold. That's the only additive you need to add to it. So diesel fuels, you could buy just whatever diesel you find. It's pretty much the same in most places and does not go bad.
All right, good. Okay, how important is it to use the exact amount of oil in the 50-to-1 mix? Can I measure close to the right amount from a large bottle? Should I buy pre-measured bottles?
Well, how important is it? How important is it to keep running your chainsaw? Because if you guess wrong and you burn up your saw, then it was probably a bad mistake and you're not going to be too happy about it. If you mix it too rich, you're going to probably plug up a fuel filter, maybe foul up a spark plug, and it's not going to hurt anything. But if you guess too lean, then you cause some major problems. So it's pretty important. Using the pre-mixed or the pre-can size where you put 1 bottle to 1 gallon of gas is the most foolproof way to do it. If you want to buy oil in bulk, which saves you money, then you get a graduated funnel that's got measurements on the side. Ratio right is the most popular one there is out there, and you could simply use that to measure out how much oil you need to put to your gas. I would not guess at it at all.
Good advice. Will the airport pump the gas into any color 5-gallon tank? Oh,
good question. I've never had them ask or even question me. I used to, I haven't gone myself. I send my employees to go get gas now at the Aurora Airport. And when I went, they would pump it into whatever cans I had. They've always been red, so I've never questioned about other colors. Now I'm told that they have a self-service, so nobody's even going to know if you pump it into a wrong colored can. You want to be slightly careful with using wrong colored cans because they color them for reasons. Red should be for gasoline, but if it's your can and you know what you're doing, then there shouldn't be any problem.
What would cause bar oil to leak from the still wood boss circa 1984? Leaks from the bottom of the body when stored. Doesn't seem to when it's running.
There's a lot of variables that go in here. One of the more common reasons for bar and chain oil to leak out of a steel chainsaw is because they will create their own siphoning effect. When the oiler stops in just the right spot and you have heat within the chainsaw that actually pressurizes that tank slightly, it'll simply push it out and create a siphoning effect, and it will drain right out of your oiler itself. It appears to come out the bottom because it comes out the side and works its way down to the bottom, and it looks like it's coming out the bottom, but it's generally coming out your oiler. This is amplified when you store your saw in an enclosed case because it holds that heat within that case. So leaving it out and letting it cool down properly will help alleviate that, and then putting it in the case, but it's not foolproof. Sometimes even that you'll still get bar and chain oil leaks. The biggest secret to keep that from happening is to make sure your bar and chain oil is less than half full when you put it away. You'll get less siphoning for that. With that said, if the oiler itself is not siphoning, there's many other things that could be causing a problem. You've got oil lines that could be cracked, causing a problem. You've got seals and gaskets that could be causing a problem. But if it's not causing any leakage when you're running it, it's almost always from the oiler itself causing a siphoning effect. You could replace the oiler. 50% of the time it works. The other half, it doesn't work. My recommendation is to keep a good clean rag underneath it to soak up the oil.
There's one just observation. I wish they learned some of this info 30 years ago. Local airport, here I come. I wish they were closer to your shop.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have any airports right next door to us.
I have a Husqvarna chainsaw. It starts and stalls. It runs but does not idle. Any advice?
The not idling, so if it starts and stalls, if it's starting at all, it's generally good compression and spark. That almost takes care of those two. So you're talking a fuel-related problem. Could be an air leak. If it's got a major air leak, it almost always affects your idle, and it just won't idle. If it's got a slight air leak, it'll idle fast. Major air leaks will make it come down to an idle and die. With that said, it could more than likely be a check valve in the carburetor. They've got high-speed and low-speed check valves, depends on which one they have. If it's a low-speed check valve causing you a problem, then it will certainly give you a idle problem.
What kind of chainsaw sharpener do you recommend?
I recommend the kind of chainsaw sharpener that you are the most comfortable with. And that's a vague answer, but there's a billion different types of sharpeners, and if you wait till tomorrow, there'll be a new one out because they're always inventing new ones. What I use the most, if I'm not at the shop using the $500 bench grinder that we use in the shop, I'm just using just a file and a handle. I've been doing this many, many years, and I could do it without really even thinking, but I find the best results with that. If you cannot hold the file accurate enough to keep your angles proper, they make files with guides on them that will help with your accuracy as far as keeping your angles proper. Steel has developed a new 2-in-1 sharpener or 3-in-1 sharpener that will sharpen, it'll maintain your rakers and set your depth gauge all at one time. It's a really nice sharpener. It's fairly complex to learn how to use. Once you learn how to use it, it maintains your chain a lot more efficiently. It's not a fast sharpener, but it does work very well, fairly expensive. There's battery-powered sharpeners, there's Dremels, there's little rotary ones. There's all sorts of different ones they have out there. The most important one is the one that you get the best results with that you actually use. Most customers will typically touch up their chain 2 or 3 times bring it into the shop. That way we could maintain and set your angles so they're all factory angled again. And then you go out and touch it up a couple times yourself, which is a great way to do it. You do not need to bring it in to me every single time unless you just don't want to sharpen it yourself.
Can I use regular 30-weight oil for the gas oil mix in a chainsaw 50-to-1, or only the pre-made mix?
You could get away with a regular 30-weight oil if you have a 1950s chainsaw, because that's what they used back then. I would not use it on anything from probably mid-60s and newer. The chainsaws just will not take it. They're too high performance. If you have any newer chainsaw at all, you definitely want to use the prescribed two-cycle oil mix, mixing it at the ratio of the oil or the chainsaw, whatever happens to pertain to it at the time. If there was a worst case scenario and I'm stuck somewhere and I have to use my chainsaw and the only thing I've got is some 30-weight oil, yeah, you betcha I'm going to mix it because it'll give me some lubrication, but I'm going to use it as little as possible, then dump it out and never use that again if at all possible. So it would work, but only for a short period of time. These new saws are way too high performance and will get way too hot, and it'll burn up that 30-weight oil just like you're not even running any oil in it at all.
In regards to the compression checking, kind of clarify, you mean lifting the saw by the handle vertically, horizontally? You're talking about the starter handle, the cord. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, let me clarify a little bit. So you're going to grab the starter, or grab the chainsaw by the starter cord handle, lift it up. If you could do it with one hand, great. Otherwise, use two hands. Do not lift it by the regular handles that you'll hold it when you're running it. So you're simply going to lift it up with your starter handle and let the whole saw hang off that starter handle. If it starts to drop under compression, that means you're losing compression. You may drop 1 or 2 strokes, so it'll drop, maybe 6 inches in the matter of a minute's time. But if it drops more than that, if it goes bump, 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 bump down to the bottom, that means you get low on compression.
Thanks for the clarification. Does the Salem Airport sell avgas? Do you know?
Do not know. I'm going to assume most small airports do. Salem's probably not a very big airport, so I imagine they do. But I have not been there. I cannot clarify that.
All right. What's your opinion of auto-tune chainsaws? Are they reliable?
Auto-tune chainsaws. Not sure what you mean by auto-tune chainsaws. I'm going to assume you mean one that is electronic, computer controlled. Yeah, for the most part, they're very reliable. They could tell when you've got elevation change. They could tell when it's a cold start or a hot start. I've had very, very few problems with them. They're man-made, so they certainly have some problems, but in an overall spectrum, extremely low failure rate, and they perform quite well.
What about using used motor oil for bar oil?
Again, if you've got a 1950s chainsaw, it might be okay when the chain goes so slow you count the teeth as it goes around. But with the modern chainsaws, the chain speed is so fast that, number one, motor oil will not cling to the chain. It will fling off, and the bottom part of your bar will be running basically without any oil on it at all. Used motor oil promotes even more wear, because when you have used oil, it's got all the grime and grit that comes out of your engine that you drained it out of, and now you're putting that onto your bar and chain, which is 2 pieces of metal rubbing against each other, and you do that with grit in your oil, you're going to promote excessive bar and chain wear. Again, the loggers who used to do it 50 years ago did it because the chain speed was so slow it didn't really matter. Any lubrication on there was good. But nowadays chainsaws definitely do not want to use used motor oil.
Can cracking open the oil filler cap till it's cool help with the oil siphoning issue? So back on the
yes,
oil.
It's not going to hurt it. It hasn't been a foolproof way, but keeping the pressure out of that, especially while the heat dissipates, is a good idea. Most people won't take the time to do that. but it would probably help, absolutely.
Once a chain, let's see, I can't read there's a typo there. Once a chain gets very dull, can it be brought back to sharp? I can't quite read the words there, so I think it's just saying when you get really dull, can it bring it back to sharpen it up again?
Yes, you can. The duller the chain, the more you have to sharpen to bring it back that far. So you're simply sharpening, grinding, filing metal away unnecessarily until you get back to the sharpen point. So you're causing excessive work to sharpen it and an excessive wear on your chain. Not to mention when you're running a dull chain, when it gets that dull, your saw and your bar and your chain and everything is taking the brunt of that dullness because you're literally having to push it through the log, and it's causing promoting wear everywhere else besides just the chain. So it's never a good idea to run it that dull. However, sometimes it dictates when you're running a saw and you hit a nail or something like that and gets that dull. Yeah, you could sharpen it that far back. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's it for all the questions right now. And what I'd like to do is, if you don't mind, I'd like to share, there's 2 presentations coming up next week, and I only gave you the advertisement for one of them, Rob. So if you don't mind stop sharing, I'll share the announcements for next week's presentations, and then we'll wrap up with a poll. So let's see.
All right, there you go.
I can do that. And so just want to let folks know that we've got 2 different shows coming up. One is the free online forest planning, Tuesday morning, June 23rd, a week from today. And the one after that is insects in the trees. Are they pests or non-pests, with Christine Buell. So just wanted to promote those 2 a week from today, both morning and afternoon. And with that, I also want to run the poll. So this is just to see what you thought of the webinar today and give us your input. And we're not going to show the results, but if you don't mind, before you leave, if you could fill out the poll. And then in that case, if you have any more questions that you can think of while we're voting, feel free to ask Rob. I see a couple more in the Q&A, so we'll let folks run the poll. Is there a difference in the feel of using a rip chain versus a regular chain?
Yeah, your rip chain has different angles and different tooth spacings and design of teeth designed for ripping. If you're trying to cut firewood with ripping chain, it's just not as efficient. You're better off using a regular chain for ripping instead of a ripping chain for regular saw cutting. They both have their own purposes. I do both. I saw lumber with my chainsaw mill all the time. And for the most part, I do not use ripping chain for that. I use just a regular chain, and I've changed the file or the angle settings on it. But they do make special ripping chains specifically for ripping. And while you can interchange them, it's not advisable to do so.
Is it a good idea to have several chains to rotate for use?
Absolutely. Biggest recommendation is to have at least one extra chain, but it depends on how much you cut, how hard you cut, and what you're doing. It's a good idea to have as many chains as you might need throughout the day. That way you're not having to stop and sharpen it. So if you normally sharpen 3 times, have 3 sets of chains, and that way you just change them out. It takes less time to change a chain than it does to sharpen one, and then you can sharpen it at your leisurely, or you can take it into a shop and have them sharpen it.
Okay. Here's a good one. When do you know it's time to replace your bar?
You'll see some wear on the bar. You'll start feeling a lip that gets on your bar from the wear. It actually rolls the lips of the bar over, and you can feel that with your fingernails. That doesn't mean it's ready to be replaced, but it needs to be, those rails need to be cleaned out. Your chain eventually will start to flop side to side, and when it can no longer hold a straight line, when you're trying to cut and it wants to cut in a curve, that's when you need to replace it. If you're using a modern saw using proper bar and chain oil and you're not getting your chain too dull, most modern bars last almost the life of a chainsaw nowadays.
All right. Do you need the saw with the chain to sharpen it, or do we just bring in the chain?
You could bring it in either way. I do not need the saw. We take it off the saw to sharpen it 90% of the time. However, if you bring the saw in with your chain, then we could quickly look over the bar and the sprocket to see how those are wearing and give you advice on when you need to replace those also, which doesn't cost you anything extra.
All right. How about anti-kickback chains?
There is no such thing as anti-kickback. They have reduced kickback, and it's just a clarification there because I'm not allowed to say that other anti-kickback. There is a difference in them. The modern day chains, the reduced kickback chain that they have nowadays cuts extremely fast. It's not like the original reduced kickback chain of yesteryear. Most people that want a reduced kickback chain or a non-reduced kickback chain, and I sell them a reduced kickback chain, generally cannot tell the difference because they cut so well. The reduced kickback chain should cut normal, except for up at the bar tip, it reduces the kickback area. And even at that, you can still bore with the saw if you use it properly. Most loggers want a reduced kick or non-reduced kickback chain, but 99% of the chains I sell, even those who request a faster cutting chain, get a reduced kickback chain.
Okay, can a slightly bent bar be straightened?
Depends on the type of bar. They make two different bars, a solid bar and a laminated bar. Laminated bar is simply 3 pieces of metal that are spot welded together. If those get bent at all, you simply replace them because every time you try to straighten it out or bend it more, it will separate those spot welds and then you end up with a bad bar. If it's a solid bar, you could straighten them out somewhat, as long as they're not too bad. Yeah, absolutely.
Should you grease the little hole in the tip end of the bar?
You should grease that little hole every time you fill it up with gas, unless you get a modern steel saw. The new steel bars do not use a grease hole there anymore. They supply all the oil from your bar and chain to that bar tip. Years ago, we used to replace lots of bar tips. Ever since steel took that hole out, I hardly ever replace a bar tip anymore. So if you have a hole there, absolutely grease it.
Very good. My local steel shop said they can't get parts for one of my saws, early 1980s. Is that true? Do parts stop being available?
Manufacturers are required to supply parts for X amount of years, and I can find that out. I don't have that number in front of me. Steel generally goes twice that long before they stop selling parts, and they usually have plenty of parts on hand, so they end up going almost 3 times that number before they are no longer available. So being an early 80s saw, yes, it's possible that they're not available for you. Generally, you could find them online. Steel is a popular enough saw. There's enough of them out there. You could find a used or a brand new one off eBay or somewhere sitting on somebody's shelf. But through steel, oftentimes, yeah, they're obsolete.
Here's a clarification. Grease or oil in the hole at the tip of the bar?
You want to use a light lithium grease.
All right. Well, here's an observation someone looked up while listening. There's a card lock at the airport down the road, closer than any gas station. I have to figure out how to get in. Do card locks have avgas?
I don't know. I'm not sure what gas station you're talking about. I was just informed the other day that there's one down on the corner of 213 and 205 that is a card lock, and that they have non-ethanol gas, but it's not avgas.
Right. Well, unless there's any more that pop up, I think we've run out of questions, Rob.
Okay.
I guess in that case, I'll give folks another second. We still have a little bit of time left, but otherwise, just thank you very much for sharing your expertise and helping us out troubleshooting our small engines. And I think it's all about the fuel. That's a big one. I've experienced that myself, I know.
Yeah, the frustration of equipment that doesn't run is never fun for anybody. You're out there trying to do a job. So anytime I could be of assistance, feel free to stop by, give me a call. More than happy to talk you through whatever you want to do yourself, or if you don't want to do it, more than happy to take care of it for you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rob. And thanks everyone for listening, and we'll hope to see you at the next Tree School online webinar.
Thanks, Glenn.